The DOJ released former special counsel Jack Smith's report on the investigation into the Trump election interference case. We're going to talk about that and how important that is, the voters spoke and that Donald Trump got a second term. And I'll explain more in just a moment. First, let's start with a comment that we missed towards the end of the program yesterday. Trump now has California to deal with right from the jump. How can he tackle all of this if they continue to fight him as before? I hope he can be steadfast and steamroll over them like they did with his first term. They never let up. Yeah, they never did let up. And that's why this Jack Smith, that's perfect timing on this report by Jack Smith. But a couple other breaking stories from throughout the night and late yesterday, and then we're going to get right to the Jack Smith report. But Israel and Hamas have reached a breakthrough in the hostage and ceasefire negotiations. It is kind of interesting, as I was watching the news this morning, getting ready for work, that they're trying to give Biden credit while begrudgingly mentioning Trump's hand in all of this. But mediators have handed Israel and Hamas the final draft of a deal that could finally bring the 15-month-long Gaza war to a close, with U.S. officials saying a ceasefire was closer than it's ever been after a midnight breakthrough in negotiations. An official briefed on the talks, which have been attended by envoys of both U.S. President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump, told Reuters that Qatar presented terms to both sides at a conference in the nation's capital of, and I'm going to try it here, Doha. The ceasefire agreement's text could end hostilities and release hostages, and another round of talks planned for this morning will let the opponents hammer out the remaining details, according to officials. In a Monday statement, Hamas said it was keen on reaching a deal. Meanwhile, an Israel official said negotiations to release up to 33 Israeli hostages taken during Hamas's savage October 2023 attack were in advanced stages. So that's just a quick update. Now, if you recall on Sunday's programs, specifically Fox News, J.D. Vance, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, said that the hostage deal talks between Israel and Hamas are progressing because the terrorist organization is terrified of Donald Trump's warnings. And you recall, he is not, now President-elect Donald Trump has been not mincing words when talking to Hamas. It means enabling the Israelis to knock out the last couple of battalions of Hamas and their leadership. It means very aggressive sanctions and financial penalties on those supporting terrorist organizations in the Middle East. It means actually doing the job of American leadership, Vance said. We're hoping there's a deal that's struck toward the very end of the Biden administration, maybe the last day or two. But regardless of when the deal is struck, it will be because people are terrified that there are going to be consequences for Hamas. And I think he's right. You know, we've talked about this in the past with Trump. Hamas and other terrorist organizations aren't sure what he would do, and that terrifies them. Now, if you recall, Trump, again, saying that he essentially demanding that the hostages would be released before Inauguration Day, or there would be, and I quote, hell to pay. So that is a quick update on the negotiations there. Also, just because we talk about China so often, and this is just kind of a one-off story, but I saw this morning in a breaking story as well. China is reportedly constructing D-Day style barges, which could be used in an invasion of Taiwan. At least 3 of the new crafts have been observed in southern China. Experts told the Telegraph that the barges, which seemingly draw inspiration from the Mulberry Harbors built for the Normandy landing in 1944, could prove critical in an amphibious invasion of Taiwan. The vessels reportedly feature a bridge which could be used to transport tanks and supplies across unpassable ground onto the island of Taiwan, which China regards as part of its territory. Currently, Taiwanese forces have been operating under the assumption that an attack by the Chinese People's Liberation Army would have to take place at a handful of strongly defended ports. By allowing China's forces to bypass rocky or soft beaches unsuitable for heavy vehicles like tanks, the barges would provide multiple fronts for an invasion while thinning out Taiwanese defenses. So that's a very troubling bit of news there, as we've talked about the real serious threat of China, them wanting to be a superpower, the lone superpower. I had speculated, or I shouldn't say speculated, but was concerned that we could see something before the end of the Biden administration because of the weakness that the Biden administration has shown on the world front with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So not necessarily surprised, nonetheless troubling. Okay, let's talk about last night. The Justice Department made public Volume 1 of former Special Counsel Jack Smith's final report on his now closed investigation into President-elect Trump. This coming from Fox News. Keep in mind, this is just days before he's been sworn into office. Now, you have McCann, who wanted so badly to make sure that Trump was labeled a convicted felon before being sworn in. He got his wish on Friday with that sentencing. Now, yes, there will be appeal, etc. But the idea is that he will technically be labeled a convicted felon now with that sentencing on Friday. Now you have Jack Smith trying to bloody up the administration before taking office. Attorney General Merrick Garland released the first volume, which focuses on the election case against Trump. This was at a midnight release. The report was released at midnight because that was when the original hold on Volume 1 expired. An opening letter from Smith, who resigned last week, to Garland said that it is laughable that Trump believes the Biden administration or other political actors influenced or directed his decisions as a prosecutor, stating that he was guided by the principles of federal prosecution. So it's laughable that this was lawfare used, one of many examples of lawfare used against then candidate Donald Trump. Quote, Trump's cases represented one in which the offense was the most flagrant, the public harm the greatest, and the proof of the most certain, Smith said. In the lengthy report, Smith said his office fully stands behind the decision to bring criminal charges against Trump because he, quote, resorted to a series of criminal efforts to retain power after he lost in 2020. He said in his conclusion, again, Jack Smith, that the parties were determining whether any material in the superseding indictment was subject to presidential immunity when it became clear that Trump had won the 2024 election. The department then determined the case must be dismissed before he takes office because of how it interprets the Constitution. Quote, the department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the office stands fully behind. Now, in an early Tuesday morning post, yes, I know today's Tuesday, very early, Donald Trump does not have a typical bedtime. He called Smith desperate and deranged for releasing his fake findings in the middle of the night. We don't have to go through the history of Smith. We know this was one of many avenues of this lawfare that really, again, to quote Trump at that rally, paraphrase probably, when he said that I'm one indictment away from the White House. The classified records case was dismissed in July of 2024 by U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Florida Judge Eileen Cannon, who ruled that Smith was unlawfully appointed as special counsel, if you recall that. Smith charged Trump in the U.S. District Court for Washington, D.C. in his 2020 election case, but after Trump was elected, Smith sought to dismiss the case. So this is a late night dump of the investigation into Trump's election interference case. Again, proving kind of this lawfare against the now president-elect and why it was so important that Trump was elected. So important of why this lawfare needs to stop. You've heard others say this as well, not just President Trump, but that there's no place in this country for this lawfare. Indeed, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. That's the main quote they're taking away from this report. This is the kind of the takeaway that the media is running with. So there is your update. It is a breaking story because, as I said, it was released at midnight last night. Has Trump... Well, let's go back. Throughout my service as special counsel, seeking to influence the election one way or the other or seeking to interfere in its outcome played no role in our work. My office has one North Star, to follow the facts and law wherever they lead. Nothing more and nothing less, said Jack Smith. While I relied greatly on the counsel, judgment, and advice of our team, I want to be clear that the ultimate decision to bring charges against Mr. Trump was mine. It is a decision I stand behind fully. It is equally important for me to make clear that nobody within the Department of Justice ever sought to interfere with or improperly influence my prosecutorial decision-making. And to all who know me well, the claim that Mr. Trump, that my decision as a prosecutor were influenced or directed by the Biden administration or other political actors is, in a word, laughable. Now, Mr. Smith, of course, very... what's the word I'm looking for? Egotistical. Trump hit back at Smith, claiming him as deranged and a lame brain prosecutor, saying deranged Jack Smith was unable to successfully prosecute the political opponent of his boss, crooked Joe Biden. So he ends up writing yet another report based on information that the unselected committee of political hacks and thugs illegally destroyed and deleted, because it showed how totally innocent I was and how completely guilty Nancy Pelosi and others were. Jack is a lame brain prosecutor who was unable to get his case tried before the election, which I won in a landslide. The voters have spoken. You can see the difference it could have made if Jack Smith got his way and had the case tried before the election. So again, special counsel report condemns Trump's, quote, criminal efforts to retain power in 2020, according to CNN. The big story of the day. I'd love to hear from you. Stay with us. So we got to take a short break. This is Frankly Speaking here, WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us.
Attention, Elmaron may lead to vision loss.
If you have suffered vision problems after taking Elmaron to treat bladder pain, call the Hearn Law Firm. Elmaron may be responsible for your vision problems, and you may deserve compensation for your injuries.
If you took Elmaron and now have vision problems, call the Hearn Law Firm at 888-308-3866 right now. You could find out if you qualify in less than 2 minutes. Call 888-308-3866 for your free case review.
In immunity, there are people fulfilling a calling that's more than work.
They're direct support professionals.
They're the champions who empower people to achieve their full potential.
It's not just a job. It's about making a real difference.
Join us in a career where your impact means you help someone grow and learn.
Where you're not just going to work.
You're becoming a part of someone's world.
Become a direct support professional
And build a career with meaning.
It's more than work.
It's your calling.
Think boots, think Hesselsen's. Hesselsen's has the largest selection of work boots in the area. Composite and steel-toe boots, Met-Guard boots, soft-toe boots, and hikers, duty and western boots, all in one location. Hesselsen's at Meyer Heights. Hesselsen's has men's and ladies' boots in all sizes and widths. Choose from the largest names in the industry: Danner, Carolina, Timberland Pro, Keen Utility, Thorogood, Area, and Georgia, to name just a few. Hesselsen's has been locally owned and operated since 1955, so when you think local service and great selection, think Hesselsen's. Remember, it's always fun to poke in the corners at Hesselsen's.
Do you want a new bathroom but don't think it's in your budget? Bath Planet is now offering special financing with no payments or interest for an entire year. Sit back, relax, and we will bring the showroom to you. Our certified design team will show you hundreds of color and pattern options and work with you to build your dream bathroom with a price good for an entire year. Go with the company that people trust. Bath Planet, 2 locations serving the entirety of the Twin Tiers.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio with so much to discuss this morning, so much going on. Let's go to some viewer comments. Hi, Frank. Hey, Steve, how are you? It's good to see you. Good to hear from you, I should say. Good morning. Well, good morning. First, thoughts and prayers for the people of California, of course. After thinking, and we're going to talk about California here in just a second. After thinking about the whole situation in California, insurance companies leaving the state and refusing to offer fire insurance, water not being available to help put out the fires, the mayor leaving the country just at the right time, is it beyond comprehension that it was intentional not to stop the fires? So there has to be so much rebuilding that they can create all the housing needed for the illegal immigrants. What is your thoughts about this? I don't think it's that. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was incompetence at every single level. I understand why it is so bad that you could almost lead into conspiratorial, or maybe that's not the right word, but lead into this thought, because it was that bad. I see that Gavin Newsom now so he's blamed local. Then who did he blame? I think the county, was it? and now he's blaming Elon Musk or something. I mean, this just goes to show you when, especially like California, we deal with it here a little bit in New York, so untouchable, so far left that you can get away with, quote, anything, and then that came back to backfire because I can't imagine, and I could be wrong, I can't imagine that Gavin Newsom would still be considered in the front runners of the next presidential race for the Democratic Party. They are saying that the fire has human origins. They believe it was in a very popular hiking trail. This from the Los Angeles Times, that the person speaking on this wanted to do so on the condition of anonymity. Explained the Palisades fire appears to have human origins. The Skull Rock area is reportedly being investigated as being a potential starting point for the Palisades fire. Now, there was also thoughts at one point that it was due to fireworks on New Year's Eve, but it is just one failed decision by that state after another. Oh, I forgot another comment. Sorry. We're going to get back to California here in just a moment. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. Thanks for cheering me up this morning. Which story was it? Was it China setting up D-Day type barges? Was it Jack Smith releasing his report? For what other reason? I mean, it's just like making sure that they could officially say he's a convicted felon. It's just this last minute pettiness. Speaking of pettiness, we're going to talk about Gavin Newsom as well here in just a moment. But speaking of Trump, President-elect Trump's team is discussing a trip to survey the LA fires. Donald Trump's team is reportedly discussing a trip for the president-elect to visit Los Angeles and see the fire devastation there. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, whom Trump has criticized greatly for the state's fire response and lack of preparedness, invited Trump to take a look for himself. Shortly after the wildfires began tearing through LA County last week, Trump took to his Truth Social platform, blasting Governor, he calls him Newscum, and LA Mayor Karen Bass, their gross incompetence that has led to this total wipeout. And that goes into a comment that he made. What program was this on? He slammed Governor Newsom over his handling of the deadly fires earlier this week. And he said the 24 confirmed deaths are likely just a fraction of the real toll as first responders start sifting through the buildings and the scorched earth. This was on an interview with Newsmax. He said they're going to find many bodies. Only the dogs will find them, right? German shepherds will. They could pick out the ashes immediately. It's amazing. But we're going to find many bodies and many, many more dead. I believe it's greater damage than if they got hit by a nuclear weapon. I've never seen anything like it. Vast miles and miles of houses just burnt to a crisp. There's nothing standing. When the dust settles, Trump plans to refurbish the area through new development and a rare return to his real estate roots. We're going to do things with Los Angeles. I'm already putting on my developer cap because it looks literally. I just saw some very guarded pictures of it. And it's far worse than even you see on television. It's that unbelievable. Now, Kamala Harris, I guess the only way you could say is a word salad. Vice President Harris was roasted for delivering a word salad in which she tried to encourage California wildfire victims to, quote, find anything that gives them an ability to be patient during this crisis. Quote, it's critically important that, to the extent you can find anything that gives you an ability to be patient in this extremely dangerous and unprecedented crisis, that you do. Harris reportedly said the remarks during the same meeting in which she and President Joe Biden and other officials met to discuss the ongoing federal response. During the meeting, Biden announced that wildfire victims would receive a one-time payment of $770. Is that real? A one-time payment of $770. I mean, I don't even think that could get you enough money to travel to a hotel for a night. But going back to, remember, this could have been our president, Kamala Harris. It's critically important that, to the extent you can find anything that gives you an ability to be patient in this extremely dangerous and unprecedented crisis, that you do. Wow. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, Gavin Newsom goes after Elon Musk in a petty attempt, his lamest and latest both attempt to shift the wildfire blames. Now, you've got to think, if you're Gavin Newsom, you put in failed far-left policies. You've had this homeless population. You have immigration problems. All of this, but you're kind of untouchable. It's kind of like the reason why I equated it to New York is very much like former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who was untouchable by the media. They wanted to see him potentially run for president. They saw him as a star during COVID at first. Same with Gavin Newsom. If it weren't for Biden and the way everything went down, where it was Harris, Gavin Newsom probably would have been the candidate. Now you can see that start to crumble, and he's grasping at anything and anyone to blame. He's so far blamed local officials. He's so far blamed, I believe it was a county yesterday or 2 days ago, now blaming Elon Musk. We're going to talk about that and some of his policies that led to this. That's why I understand, to Steve's point, why people are saying, how could this be so disastrous? The failed leadership, not just with Newsom, though I think a lot of the blame goes to Newsom, but also LA Mayor Karen Bass, who was, to Steve's point, who was out of town in Africa, as a matter of fact, when the wildfires began. But again, these are two people that think they're untouchable because it is such a far left state. They don't have to worry. They're going to they'll be voted in consistently. They can keep pushing forward with their ideas of cutting the budget for the fire department to give to the homeless population, or focusing the fire department on DEI initiatives. We also see that Gavin Newsom at the state level also cutting the fire budget. We're going to talk about that as well, but stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
Getting the right representation.
It matters.
Hiring a law firm whose focus is motor vehicle accident cases.
It matters.
Hiring a firm with the experience and resources to maximize your recovery.
It matters.
William Mattar is the largest motor vehicle accident firm in New York State. We got that way by winning. If you're hurt in a car, it matters who you hire. Call William Mattar. Visit williammattar.com.
It's a brand new 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Premium all-wheel drive featuring power moonroof and heated seats for only $359 a month for 36 months. Make carbine simple. Drive your deal at Simmons Rockwell Subaru in Big Flats.
Want to know why it's hard to stop a train? It's how we've invented products that reinvented our world. It's how we test as hard as the elements do. It's how we run.
Aaron's Heating and Air Conditioning in Corning, New York is a local, veteran-owned and operated company with over 25 years experience. From service and repair to new installations, trust the experts at Aaron's Heating and Air Conditioning.
In a few words, Urkel, glasses, nerd. It pays to know your nerds. If you guys didn't get nerd with me sitting up here on this show, 25 words or less.
Weeknights at 5 and 5:30 on Big Fox.
The Big Fox website is here now. WYDCTV.com. Local and national news that keeps you informed and involved. WYDCTV.com. Today's weather, up to date and in your town. WYDCTV.com. Sports news, local events, and health stories that affect you. WYDCTV.com. The Big Fox website. Your news here now. WYDCTV.com.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street. In Corning, we are going to talk about the cabinet picks that Trump has made. Of course, those hearings begin today. Pete Hegseth, that's the big one that many in the media are focusing on. Today, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Gavin Newsom goes after Elon Musk in a petty latest attempt to shift the wildfire blames. This is coming from the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. And you've got to remember, a lot of the mainstream media is steering clear of criticism of Newsom, of Bass. But you notice how they spin it. And that's why Ron DeSantis did such a great job the other day. They said, do you think that it's right for Trump to try to politicize this? That with those truth posts that he's politicizing it and going after Gavin Newsom? And Ron DeSantis said, you're the one that's politicized this. He went right after him and called him out for, number one, their lack of coverage when it comes to Newsom and Bass, but also trying to consistently attack the now president-elect. But Gavin Newsom has lashed out at incoming White House official Elon Musk, accusing him of spreading lies about the Los Angeles fire. The California governor shared a video of Musk speaking with a command team about water availability to tackle the historic ongoing blazes, claiming it showed him being, quote, exposed by firefighters for his own lies. But it is unclear what lies Newsom was referring to in the clip, which sees Musk discussing the supply of water available to firefighters during the inferno. Now, the Daily Mail reached out to Gavin Newsom, wondering about this gotcha moment, what exactly he was talking about. Musk has made multiple politically charged comments about the wildfires via the social media platform X, including blaming bad governance at the state and local level for a shortage of water to tackle the infernos. Now, how is that politically charged? I mean, this is why they keep saying it's politically charged in the media, because they want to put the attention and the focus on, in this case, Musk or on President-elect Trump, because they don't want to talk about the failed leadership that we are witnessing with our own eyes, unfortunately, and the poor people of California that are suffering under this failed leadership. Now, in that video, Musk can be heard asking whether water availability was an issue in Malibu. There was water. We have several reservoirs, but there really is no water system that can keep the pace with the fires, the firefighter responded. That all seems fair enough. But now imagine that, the Gavin Newsom, who is scratching gravel. He's concerned, rightfully so, if he has this delusion of running for president, that this could be the beginning of the end of those presidential ambitions. Now, you would hope that he's focused on the residents more than his political ambitions, but don't think for a moment that that's not in the back of his head. Here's a guy that was campaigning for president basically well before Biden was ousted. Many people were speculating at the time he was doing this campaigning in case Biden did decide to step down earlier. But we learn now that Governor Newsom cut firefighting budget, shortchanging the state's vital fire prevention programs while shelling out tens of billions of dollars on Don Quixote Green New Deal handouts. Critics, including some environmentalists, are saying now the embattled governor's new budget slashed the state's firefighting efforts by $101 million. That cut it to $2.6 billion. Only 7 months before the devastating wildfires began wreaking deadly havoc in Los Angeles. But that hasn't stopped Newsom from ringing up a mind-boggling, ready for this, $14.7 billion price tag in transitioning the state to zero-emission-only vehicles and other clean energy initiatives, and $100 billion in costs over the next several years for even more, quote, pure political climate initiatives, according to this report. So think of these numbers. He has spent over $14.7 billion on these green new energy deals, specifically for zero-emission-only vehicles. $14.7 billion, yet the budget for firefighting in a place that we know is prone to fires, $2.6 billion. Now, I'm not saying only in the sense that 2.6 isn't a lot of money. Of course it is. But obviously you have a state that is prone, as we see, to wildfires. Critics have savaged fire prevention efforts by both Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass, who cut $17.6 million from the LA Fire Department in this year's budget, which Chief Kristen Crowley warned would hamper her department's response to the fires. Crowley, meanwhile, has been criticized for focusing more on DEI than on fire prevention after taking the helm back in 2022. California Republican Assembly Leader James Gallagher said even with the funding, many projects get delayed or stalled because of the California Environmental Quality Act, lawsuits, and bureaucracy. He noted that the town of Berry Creek had been trying to clear out dead wood and other fuel to help prevent wildfires when it was stopped by environmental laws. The Northern California town was later all but destroyed by a 2020 wildfire. Now, the current wildfires raging through the Los Angeles area are on track to rack up between $250 billion and $275 billion in damages. We know that number keeps growing. Started initially at $50 billion, then $150 billion. We're now up to the prediction of $275 billion, making the disaster the costliest ever in the United States. Conservative commentator Vince Deo said it's a myth. California has bad fires because of droughts caused by climate change. Fact, California saw record rainfall in 2023. They currently lack water because they refuse to store it. It's not climate change, it's bad leadership by Gavin Newsom. Some critics have claimed that Newsom's pandering to the left because, again, thinking of running for president, makes him a futile Don Quixote when it comes to effective fire prevention. Newsom has tried to explain away the disturbing discrepancy between anti-fire and green on a new website he created just to deal with the snowballing criticism. But what's ironic is there was links in that website where you could donate to Act Blue, which I think it's Act Blue, which is the group that Kamala Harris used for campaigning. So it's a Democrat fundraising organization. The site notes that the state's firefighting budget has nearly doubled since 2019 when Newsom came into office. The number of state fire personnel has also doubled. The investments in forest management projects increased tenfold. The site, which is paid for by the governor's campaign committee, said. Newsom's office declined to comment on these issues when reached out by the New York Post. State Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones isn't convinced, pointing out that Newsom has a history of embellishing his resume. Just a few years ago, he overstated California's wildlife prevention treatment by a staggering 690%. I've always said Newsom's budget priorities are completely out of touch. Instead of addressing urgent needs like wildfire prevention, he has focused on policies that burden Californians with higher costs, like raising gas prices in the name of climate change. Speaking of which, we are going to talk about that because when California has a bad idea, New York normally emulates it. And we're going to talk about Governor Hochul's State of the State, which will be today. Some of the predictions that people are making and what she'll have to say. Some of the things that we already know. But that is today, and we'll talk about it extensively tomorrow. But we do have a couple New York State updates a little bit later on. We're just kind of wrapping up our discussion here on California. Now, other critics noted this week that while the budget may have boosted overall since Newsom came into office, it still is getting cut by tens of millions of dollars from last year to this year. This is not a time to be nickel and diming the people of California around climate investments. The cost of not investing is far, far greater than investing in climate preparedness today, said Ryan Skeetler, a spokesperson for an environmental think tank, the Climate Center. That means beefing up fire protections and other hedges against severe weather. The governor tried to play fast and loose with the facts in another uproar over state and local officials' fire preparedness. A key reservoir in Los Angeles County was bone dry when the fires broke out last week because it had been undergoing repair since February. Newsom brushed off the criticism by saying it was a county and not state reservoir, refusing to take any responsibility as California's leader for the issue. The governor has also claimed that his billion-dollar push to make 100% of new cars in the state emissions-free by 2030 will be paid for by pollution fines. So there you are. We have a budget that was cut, slashed the state's firefighting efforts by $101 million to just $2.6 billion when he spent over $14.7 billion on transitioning the state to zero-emission only vehicles. So this is another example of that lack of leadership. California's governor, the California State Senate Minority Leader said Governor Newsom, he blasted him for lumping together a special session about suing President-elect Trump with wildfire relief. So this, you may have seen yesterday, these ideas, these things they are putting into effect to try to stop or hinder Trump at the state level. Gavin Newsom held that special meeting, and it was lumping together this attack and this anti-Trump session with wildfire relief. Newsom recently expanded the current special session that was focused on suing the Trump administration to also include Los Angeles wildfire relief, said State Senator Brian Jones. I'm encouraged that Governor Newsom heard our calls to take action on the LA wildfires in the special session. However, lumping this emergency response together with a politically motivated special session to sue Trump is unnecessary and frankly insulting to those struggling through this disaster. Fire victims deserve a response that is both respectful and nonpartisan. But instead, Newsom is politicizing a tragic crisis that could focus solely on aiding those in need. Sadly, these special session bills will likely include inappropriate provisions targeting the incoming federal administration alongside vital disaster relief for Californians. All right, we got a couple other things on this, such as a recall effort already in effect on Governor Newsom. We'll talk about that and many other issues. We do have New York State issues to get to, as well as Trump's incoming administration. Boy, big news yesterday. Carrie Underwood is going to perform at the inauguration. We'll give you some other performers' names that will be a part of it. But Carrie Underwood, kind of a surprise for most people, not knowing that she would be associated with the Trump administration. So we can talk about that as well. But we got to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
Today's top story, increasing fuel costs continue to drive up inflation, making it harder to afford everything from food to home heating.
Here at Hustlesons, we know the only way to beat inflation is to fight inflation. So we're fighting back with zero interest financing and big cash rebates. Get a 4-person hot tub for your family for as little as $100 per month and pay zero interest. Or save up to $3,000 on a fabulous salt system hot tub. And of course, you will always get Hustlesons' unbelievable service. Don't let inflation fears kill your dreams. Fight back with Hustlesons. Remember, it's always fun to poke in the corners at Hustlesons.
All of these are dangerous. But when you throw this into the mix, you're just adding fuel to the fire. Don't let your future go up in flames. Drugged driving is impaired driving.
Sid and Missy face off in
Why can't we watch DuckTales? Because we don't learn anything.
Book Smarts versus Street Smarts.
Is it working? Are you feeling motivated? Very.
It's the battle of twins.
Life is so confusing. I always hoped it would be easier for me when I grew up. It's gonna be all right. You were faking. Bazinga.
Young Sheldon.
Weeknights at 6:30 on Big Fox.
Welcome to Frankly Speaking, talking to the people that affect your life, that affect all of our day-to-day lives. This is something you're not going to get anywhere else. We've got a lot to offer. There'll be a lot of news, local, regional, national, really the things that affect you. And I think you'll be glad that you tuned in. So think of it as radio on TV. Frankly Speaking, live, 2 hours long, starting at 6 a.m. on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is history. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. I see where Biden is trying his darndest to end the war with Hamas and Israel, so it gets recorded on his watch. Isn't that ironic? Yes, he is. And I see the media is willing to play along. As I mentioned, I won't say the outlet. But I was watching the news this morning, getting ready for work, and they were saying Biden negotiating hostage relief, everything. Even though, as J.D. Vance said, and we mentioned this at the beginning of the program, J.D. Vance saying over the weekend that it's clearly the threat that has Hamas terrified, because Donald Trump made it clear those hostages better be freed before Inauguration Day, or, and I will quote, they'll be hell to pay. Oh, here's a comment from a different viewer. It would be interesting to hear Joe's comments about everything that's going on. Hope he gets the time to be on the show. He does. He is going to have the time. That means former congressman, now Assemblyman, New York State Assemblyman Joe Sempolinski. Joe Sempolinski is going to be on a week from Thursday. I wanted to make sure that because we have so much to talk about, I wanted to make sure the dust had settled a little bit when it came to the budget process in New York, but specifically the state of the state. And of course, we have so much at the national level with Trump, and that'll be perfect because it'll be after the inauguration, so we'll have plenty to talk about with Joe Sempolinski. So that's next Thursday that he'll be on the program. It will be interesting to hear from him. Also, because he is the chair of the Steuben County Republicans, it'll be nice to hear from him in reference to upcoming elections, because if you're thinking of running, the petition process starts at the end of February, so it's right around the corner. So this Friday, we'll be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano to get an update on the state of the state. Then next Thursday, we'll be talking with Assemblyman Joe Sempolinski as well. We've got some other guests as well, but that's just the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. Back to California quickly. As I had mentioned, the recall effort against Newsom is now underway. Before we get texts, we have now learned that there is no recall efforts in New York. Just so you know, it's different. I think California is one of only 18 states that have these kind of recall efforts, and they've been successful in the past with it. A recall attempt to knock Governor Gavin Newsom out of office is underway as he faces sharp criticism for his handling of the wildfire, with opponents labeling his leadership as a, quote, series of catastrophic failures. Organizers against Newsom vowed to file papers in the next 2 weeks in hopes of jump-starting the process that could lead to the Democrats' ouster in the middle of his second term in the governor's mansion. The state leader, along with Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, are fighting for their political lives as the wildfires have torched more than 40,000 acres, destroying more than 12,000 structures and killed at least 24 people. In a statement by the recall organizer, Randy Economy, is that really his name, Randy Economy? He said, under the reign of Governor Newsom, living in California has become impossible for average people through years of poor policies, which have increased the cost of living, increased crime, increased drug use and homelessness, increased the cost of burden on small businesses and communities while decreasing our professional standards, educational standards, the disappearance of billions of taxpayers' dollars to failed pet programs, and our public services. This was most recently demonstrated by the woefully unprepared and incompetent response to the fires currently ravaging in Los Angeles. So, a recall effort is underway for Gavin Newsom. I wonder what this does. Listen, he was the front runner. Before the wildfires, he was the front runner. You could argue that Kamala Harris was for the next presidential election, but that's because she spent $1.5 billion. So she has that name recognition right now. But Gavin Newsom is a star, was a rising star in the Democrat Party. Now he is fighting for his political life just in general. So recall effort underway. Celebrity fitness expert Jillian Michaels predicts with all of this and the failed leadership that California will shift red after Newsom's response. You may know Michaels from The Biggest Loser television program. She attributed her changed politics because she was a Democrat from a lifelong deep blue Californian to Donald Trump supporter. She changed back in the 2018 Malibu fire, which destroyed her home, and Newsom's response to that inferno. It affected my life and it changed me. And I think you're going to see that when it touches you, it challenges or it changes you. And for California, that's a good thing because it is desperately in need of reform. The reality is that while you're seeing $20 million mansions flattened, there are thousands of people who are going to be financially devastated by this. And that's what's deeply upsetting. There's so much that could have been mitigated. So the prediction there is that California will now shift red, will now go Republican. We have a couple, how am I doing? You know, the New York Post editorial board asks a great question. Where is the LA Fires version of Rudy Giuliani? Because it's not Bass or Newsom. I thought that was a good point. Remember Rudy Giuliani, of course, America's mayor after 9/11, because he led the charge on disaster response, sparing no effort day or night to reassure the public that the city was going to fight its way back to normal and do everything in its power to steer his town through the aftermath of the deadliest attack on U.S. soil ever. And you still remember those photos. You still remember the speeches he gave, or when he was even on something like Saturday Night Live right after it happened. Bass, by contrast, ignored warnings of potentially catastrophic fires to head off on a diplomatic junket in Ghana, even though she had promised before the election that she would not be taking international trips. And apart from the vacancy, staring at a reporter who asked if she had anything to say to the voters, she left to die, and the long-belated offer platitudes like reject those who seek to divide us. She's done nothing meaningful since she got back. And then you have, of course, one-time Democrat golden boy, Governor Gavin Newsom. The fires were a chance for him to shake off the woke trance and become the leader all Californians have been waiting for. Instead, he tried to claim that there was no empty reservoir after shifting blame to dry hydrants on local folks. This weekend, he debuted a new website to fight alleged misinformation, as we mentioned, with the giving funneled through shady Democrat mega bucks machine Act Blue, which also takes a cut of such proceeds. Wow. The LA fires and the Newsom-Bass Flail Fest reminds us that political leadership really does matter, and that in moments of disaster, it's all that matters. That's what Rudy's example in Gotham shows us and always will. And the ever louder outrage among Los Angeles and Golden State residents more broadly shows just how clearly the public understands that, even if their leaders seem utterly blind to it. I thought that was a very good point by the New York Post. But let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us.
Have you been unable to work for over a year due to a mental or physical disability?
Were you recently denied Social Security disability benefits? Great news. You may be eligible for money, back pay, relief.
If you've been pre-qualified and diagnosed with a recognized condition that prohibits you from working, our lawyers can file a claim to get your disability benefit.
Call us today and find out more.
Call now, 844-617-0440.
Diamondback rattlesnake.
It's in the name. Name a low-calorie food you might make your edible underwear out of.
Salmon.
Watch it weeknights. Share it the next day.
Wild caught Norwegian teriyaki.
Share in the fun. Weeknights on Family Feud.
7 and 7:30 on Big Fox.
It's a new season of Sherry.
Having a good time has always been my #1 goal. I tend to get crazy. At my age, I should not be jumping up and down like that. And if you don't know what I mean, ask your mama. The young ones, y'all like, we don't know what you're talking about. But I promise you, in 30 years, you will.
It's the best time in daytime.
Weekdays at 2 p.m. on Big Fox.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Wrapping up our discussion on the wildfires, just a thought, and this is more to get your opinion. Erica Sandberg writes, no blank federal check. California Democrats have proven they can't be trusted. No, California Democrats, you can't keep the funding tap on full blast when you have shown year after year that you can't properly manage the flow. House Speaker Mike Johnson is correct in using a no blank check warning to the state. Obviously, there has been water resource mismanagement, forest management mistakes, all sorts of problems, Speaker Johnson said. And it appears to us that the state and local leaders were derelict in their duty and in many respects. It is crucial for California to ensure that such funds are allocated efficiently and intelligently. Without transparent oversight, there is a significant risk that these funds would be misallocated or disappear without a trace. So that I think they raise a good point here. When you see the failed leadership of Gavin Newsom, cutting so much from the fire budget, but then putting so much more into these pie-in-the-sky green energy pet projects, that a blank check, as Speaker Johnson correctly put it, no blank check to California. Your thoughts on that? All right. So we talked about the California wildfires, but today is the big day. The state of the state from Governor Hochul. According to, I believe this was USA Today, but I could be wrong on that. Governor Hochul's fourth state of the state address is to focus on affordability. My top priority is tackling New York's affordability crisis. The cost of living is just too darn high, so I'm doing everything in my power to make New York more affordable for families. She's already announced some of her proposals, $300 to $500 checks for households earning up to $150,000 to help compensate for inflation and lingering high prices. She said 8.6 million New Yorkers would get the one-time check. So again, listen, I will take my money back at any time. I have no problem with that. But what is that $300 to $500 really going to do when it comes to inflation? One more weeks of groceries on the governor? Well, on the taxpayer? Next up, tripling the child tax credit to $1,000 for households with children under 4, and a tax credit for up to $500 for households with children 4 to 16 years old. And then free breakfast and lunch for all public school children, serving 2.7 million and easing their families' food bills. So that's just some of the things that have already been announced that have already been proposed. And we're going to talk about what the New York Post has to say about it. But Mike Lawler, if you're not familiar with that name, we've mentioned him a few times on this program. Mike Lawler, I'm saying that strange, is a congressman. It is speculated that he is going to run for governor. So you have Richie Torres, who's a Democrat, who has signaled that he's interested in primarying Governor Hochul. So that'd be a Democrat on Democrat fight. And then after the dust clears on that, either Torres or Hochul would face perhaps Mike Lawler. He looks like he's interested in running. There may be others. He's been the one that, at least in my quote-unquote research, has been the one that get out in front of it. And he proved that with an op-ed in the New York Post this morning, just like Richie Torres has been doing a lot of op-eds for the New York Post and elsewhere regarding New York State politics. What Richie Torres, again, the Democrat, what he's been doing is very smart, and that is speaking out on public safety issues. He saw the success that Lee Zeldin had with that as a Republican. So imagine in his mind, if he can show that he's Mr. Public Safety, he might stand a very good chance of beating Hochul on the Democrat primary. I think if you look at some of his history, he's not proven himself to be very strong on public safety issues, but as of right now, he sounds like a conservative in his op-eds. But Mike Lawler did a piece on that, which we'll talk about when we come back from break. And then we have a couple other quick New York State issues. I do want to get into the confirmation hearings that begin today. Pete Hegseth, your thoughts. Do you think he'll be confirmed? Do you think it'll be as nasty as originally predicted? Some calling it a train wreck. Some saying it will be Brett Kavanaugh, his hearings on steroids, Brett Kavanaugh 2.0. Your thoughts. Will you be watching it today? We'll be talking about it on tomorrow's program as well, along with Governor Hochul's State of the State address, which is today as well. We also have a couple things here about Trump in general. Like I said, a lot of people, and Biden too, but Trump, a lot of people shocked that Carrie Underwood signing on to be a part of the inaugural celebration. You know who else was part the last time? And I forgot to mention this. Sam Moore from the legendary group Sam and Dave. He was a part of the inauguration celebration in 2016. He passed away over the weekend. I just wanted to mention that. I meant to mention it on the program yesterday, and it got lost in my stack of stories. But we got to take a short break. When we come back, New York State and the state of the state. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
If you or a loved one regularly used hair relaxers or straighteners and were diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation.
I've used hair relaxers for years. I had no idea they could cause cancer.
Chemical hair relaxers and straighteners have been linked to serious conditions, including several types of cancer. If you used hair relaxers and have been diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, call us now. There's no fee unless we win your case. Call today.
Don't get with internet and TV that costs more and does less. Set yourself free with Spectrum and get it all from one provider. Get Spectrum Internet with enough speed for all your devices all at once with speeds of 200 megabits.
Whoa, that's fast.
Plus, get a free modem and free desktop security to keep you safe online. Get Spectrum Internet for $49.99 a month. Call 833-605-4999. And don't get stuck with the same old TV. Multiply your screens. Spectrum TV with a free Spectrum TV app lets you watch here, there, and everywhere. Stream live TV, sports, news, and more on any device. Plus, access up to 85,000 on-demand titles. Get Spectrum TV from $49.99 a month. Call 833-605-4999. Don't get stuck paying more for less. Pick and choose the services you need. Spectrum Internet or TV, or get them both for $49.99 a month each. All with no contracts. Call 833-605-4999.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. That's our beautiful view of historic Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. A couple comments from viewers as we wrap up hour number one. First off, Ken writes in, I listened to some of what Biden said yesterday. It boggles the imagination that he actually thinks he made America more prosperous in the last 4 years. But probably more unbelievable than that is that an American president is so demented that he actually believes what he is told to say. Ken, this goes back to why he believes he could beat Trump if he would have ran instead of Harris, because he has been surrounded by the same people telling him what to say and what to do and what to vote on, etc., have been telling him how great he is, that he's got another 4 years in him easily. Well, if you're surrounded by yes men and women like that for that long, eventually, you've seen it with politicians at a much lower level than president, letting that ego get to their head, I guess, for lack of a better word. Look at Governor Cuomo, who still believes he has it, and there's a poll that kind of signals that, but which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, it's that kind of yes men syndrome, and he's given, you know how we keep mentioning in the fact during the election that they'd ask voters and then mock them, ask voters, what their concerns were. They'd say, inflation's killing me. I'm broke. I can't pay my bills. I can't afford groceries. Say, no, that's not true. You're just not smart enough to get it. Here's page 39 of this book published by this bureaucrat in some department of whatever, and it shows you're actually doing really good. So imagine Biden's only getting those numbers. So yes, it is scary. It's a very scary thought, Ken. But I suppose I'm not surprised because he believes he could beat Trump. Comment from a different viewer. I could care less about any of these musicians and so-called stars personally, but I'm really turned off by Snoop Dogg performing if the rumors are true. I think right now they are rumors. I tried to look it up because I hadn't heard that. Well, I kind of did hear it, but didn't hear it like reputable. Everybody was talking about Carrie Underwood, nothing about Snoop Dogg. It sounds like he may play some ball, but I don't think anything's been set in stone. But I know that Kid Rock has supported President Trump, but why is Snoop everywhere? That's a fair question. Because he fits the elite's narrative. He was lockstep with the hate of President Trump. Yeah, that's what surprises me. So I don't think it would be an officially sanctioned event by Trump. The reason I say that, and you raise a great point here, the viewer saying, I remember his video with a fake pistol with a sign attached, bang, pointing at Trump. Where was the outrage over this? But you can't watch an NFL game without penalties for those so-called gestures, although Beyonce wasn't reprimanded during halftime for the same. Just saying. And I love this part. It makes me cringe having to say this next part from this viewer, but I appreciate it, and it did make me laugh. Just saying, what a bunch of malarkey. I'm not kidding. Biden always done. No joke. I'm not kidding. No joke. I'm not kidding. I'm not going to whisper it, though. What a bunch of malarkey. Okay, but thank you. I'm glad you brought that to our attention. I remember that at the time. That must have been back right around the beginning of Trump's presidency when Snoop Dogg did that. So I don't see that as a breaking story in many places. So if he is playing, it may be just some type of PR thing where he's going to play, some unsanctioned inaugural ball. But I could be wrong. And if I find out, I'm going to let you know as soon as I know. But that was in reference to the big story, even though the viewer said that they don't care about stars, but some do. So the big news coming out yesterday that Carrie Underwood is going to play the inauguration. So we'll talk about that, but we do got to get to New York State issues, but we got to wrap up this hour. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, still a ton to cover. Make sure you're a part of it. See the number on the bottom of the screen. Feel free to weigh in at any time. We'll be right back.
Isn't your wellness important? Don't you want more energy? Now's the best time to make every day better and relieve those achy muscles and pains than with the Hesselsen's Hot Tub. Hesselsen's has hot tubs in stock and available for immediate delivery with unbelievable savings. Hesselsen's offers 0% interest-free financing for up to 5 full years. Hesselsen's carries the only hot tub brand in the industry with the exclusive freshwater salt system that is eco-friendly and easy to use and only enhances your hot tubbing experience. Come in today and see why your next hot tub should be a Hesselsen's hot tub. And remember, it's always fun to poke in the corners at Hesselsen's.
I'm Nancy O'Dell. This is Crime Expose.
It's chilling, taunting.
We knew exactly who it was.
Blood stains on her shorts.
See you in September.
number 2 of Frankly Speaking. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We were just talking, before we get into New York State issues, we were just talking about the performers at various events surrounding the inauguration. The inauguration coming up on the 20th. It was a kind of a shock that Carrie Underwood was announced as one of the performers. I was surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. Trump's become famous for so many things, but for that Trump dance that he does, and that's normally to the YMCA by the Village People. The Village People are set to perform at his inauguration weekend, which I find it interesting because I could have swore, and I didn't have time to do the research, I could have swore that the Village People at one time were one of the groups trying to stay relevant by saying we sent a cease and desist letter that Trump has to immediately stop playing our music. But maybe they changed their mind. Some are saying Carrie Underwood, being a part of it, has shown that pop singers and actors and musicians, not actors so much, but musicians are maybe more willing to get involved after seeing the huge landslide victory by President Trump. So Kid Rock will join Carrie Underwood in performing at Donald Trump's inaugural celebration. It should come as no surprise with Kid Rock. He's been along for the ride from the beginning. He was at that UFC fight with Mike Johnson. It was such an Elon Musk right after Trump won. But Kid Rock has really been along for the ride from the beginning. So I would have to say that didn't come as a surprise. But they're going to be playing the victory rally on Sunday at the Capital One Arena in Washington. Rock has frequently referred to Trump as a great friend and one of his besties. He was one of the first mainstream entertainers to support the former Apprentice host when he ran for president in 2016, telling the Rolling Stones at the time, "I'm digging Donald Trump. My feeling, let the business guy run it like a business." And his campaign has been entertaining as, we'll say, heck. He went viral for a lewd video celebrating Trump's win as well. But so anyway, Kid Rock, not a surprise. But longtime Trump favorite, the Village People, also slated to perform. Permanently, says the New York Post, enmeshed in MAGA lore, the band's song YMCA spurred the birth of the Trump dance and was frequently played throughout the 2024 campaign. Billy Ray Cyrus will also be in the lineup. And Carrie Underwood will sing America the Beautiful at the inauguration at the U.S. Capitol on January 20th. In a statement to the Post, she said, "I love our country and I'm honored to have been asked to sing at the inauguration and to be a small part of this historic event. I'm humbled to answer the call at a time when we must all come together in the spirit of unity and looking to the future. It'll be interesting to see what kind of backlash she gets. Yes, she is country, so you may not expect too much backlash, but she still is into the pop world. She still does a lot of mainstream programs and performances. This is the kind of thing that can really end up costing you." Lee Greenwood will sing Proud to Be an American. You would have to have him there. He's always at these events. In a good way. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I like Lee Greenwood a lot. And opera singer Christopher Macchio will perform the national anthem at the inaugural ball just hours later. Country singer Jason Aldean, whose surprise 2023 hit, Try That in a Small Town, took root among the MAGA faithful. He'll be playing, along with, reportedly, Rascal Flatts. The president-elect is personally choosing the musical acts to reflect his eclectic taste, said Axios. Okay, I didn't mean to start the second hour with that, but that was just an update from a comment that we had earlier. Okay, so let's talk about the state of the state. Governor Hochul to give the address today. As I had mentioned, well, we'll talk about what Mike Lawler had to say in a minute, but the New York Post editorial board said, brace yourself for despair when Governor Hochul rolls out her 2025 agenda. With Hochul's long record of closing her ears to the public on crime, taxes, congestion pricing, energy, it's beyond safe to expect more of the same this year, especially given the early leaks of her plans. Fine. With the state spending close to $240 billion a year, she'll call for some nice-sounding new outlays: youth mental health services, free school meals, even for those whose families can pay. And she'll completely ignore what voters really want. And that is a good point, that there will be families that could afford to pay for the breakfast and lunch that will no longer have to. There has been some criticism there, but as a political optics type bill, not really a surprise. We'll take congestion pricing. New Yorkers opposed it by a whopping 51 to 29% margin per Siena. And she knew full well how unpopular it was, which is why she paused it over the summer before the elections, but then revived it just days after the November election. Her green agenda, too, is inflicting major pain. Yet instead of dialing back, she's expected to push for a new cap and invest program, hitting up oil companies that'll simply pass their new cost to consumers, just like the climate change super fund. You're going to have all these costs. We talked about it yesterday on the program. We could be looking at up to, 20 cents more per gallon because of these initiatives by the governor. So you're going to be paying more for gasoline, home heating and cooking, electricity. So Albany can invest in subsidies for unreliable alternative energy sources. Likewise, though New York has had the highest state and local taxes in the nation, Hochul refuses to lift a finger to lower them. Instead, she's raised them further and may do so again this year. All this as she claims she wants to make life more, quote, affordable here. So never mind what they're saying and doing. Just take her at her word. Look at this hand and not what the other hand's doing. She won't dare push for major fixes to the state's disastrous criminal justice reforms. She may do something very, very small and then tout it as being the biggest deal because she sees how successful it was for Lee Zeldin, but also that now that Richie Torres, who could challenge her in a primary, how aggressive he's been speaking out about public safety. You know, we could talk about cashless bail, raise the age, whatever she's pushed through, even though they've driven up crime since their passage 5 years ago. Not because Hochul believes in that nonsense. She's simply unwilling to take on the legislators' progressive loons and the special interests that feast off of Albany's sky-high spending. She doesn't have it like Cuomo did. Whatever you think about Cuomo, Cuomo was very aggressive and he got what he wanted. Hochul doesn't dare challenge the far left in Albany. Any governor dedicated to improving life in New York would aim to say, fix the state's broken crime laws and scrap the cap on public charter schools. But Hochul doesn't dare challenge Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie and State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, who oppose such efforts. No wonder that Siena poll found that 57% of New Yorkers would prefer someone else besides Hochul for governor. Yes, 57%, with only 33% saying they'd vote to reelect her. It's also why New Yorkers have been fleeing to other states. Census data in October showed the state lost a bigger share of its population than any other in 2023. True, New York's been shrinking relative to the rest of the nation for long decades. But the trend is now accelerating. And Hochul's State of the State will only provide still more reasons to head for the hills. The voters who stay in New York will get to express their displeasure by electing, quote, someone else next year. So yes, don't expect anything new. To be honest, don't expect anything thinking outside the box because she doesn't want to challenge the far left in Albany. She just doesn't have the backbone or the spine. Mike Lawler, again, who is speculated that he wants to run for governor on the Republican ticket, he did an op-ed for the New York Post, and he said, I had the opportunity to meet with President-elect Donald Trump and fellow members of Congress from states like California, New York, and New Jersey to discuss the importance of lifting or repealing the SALT cap, the unfair limit on state and local taxes that can be deducted from our federal income tax bills. We had a productive discussion, during which the president reiterated his support for raising the cap, but also expressed the need for states like New York to lower their out-of-control spending. He's right. Since 2015, when Hochul first took statewide office, New York state spending has increased by almost $90 billion. And by the way, if you are just joining us, you didn't join us in the next hour, we will be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano about the state of the state on Friday on this program. And then next week on Thursday, we'll be talking with now Assemblyman Joe Sempolinski about this and many other topics as well. Yep, $90 billion it's increased, a 59% spending increase in just 9 years. During her tenure as governor, the rate has exploded even more. Spending under Hochul soared by more than $61 billion from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 25 alone. That's why New York State ranks #1 for residents' combined state and local tax burden. On average, New Yorkers pay 12% of their income in state and local taxes. Back in 2022, Hochul and the Democrats in Albany raised the payroll mobility tax to cover for the MTA's budgetary malaise. Now they're planning on doing so yet again, increasing taxes on small businesses when so many are struggling to get by. But the taxes don't stop there. Again, if you're just joining us, this is Mike Lawler, Congressman Lawler, who it is said may be running for governor. New York is also in the top 10 for state and local sales taxes, taking on average around 8.5% of most purchases you make. So every time you stop at the convenience store for a soda or a pack of gum, you're giving even more money to Albany. Use a cell phone, there's a tax for that too. New York has the 4th highest state and local tax and fee burden on wireless services. Throw a few bucks on the Bills, Jets, or Giants in a parlay with an online sports book. Well, if you bet on the Jets and Giants this year, my condolences. But should you have won, New York would have taxed your winnings at a 51% clip, the highest rate in the nation. Make a shrewd trade on the stock market a couple of years ago, like Nancy Pelosi always seems to do. If you sell that asset, New York will make 10.9%. Will take 10.9% of your earnings. New York is taxing the living daylights out of us everywhere we turn. This is precisely why we need to get a handle on the out-of-control taxation regime operated by Kathy Hochul and Albany Democrats. It needs reforms. It needs it now. And in 2026, I'm hopeful we can deliver it by electing a new governor. But in the meantime, Hochul's extravagance should not stop President Trump and our Republican majorities in the House and Senate from agreeing to reasonable increases to the cap on salt. I propose legislation to lift the cap to $100,000 for single filers and $200,000 for married couples. That would cover the vast majority of New Yorkers and make a real difference for middle-class families in my district across the Hudson Valley and beyond. Hochul is seemingly opposed to the measure, jumping on Twitter to call my bill and the immediate tax relief it would provide to over 90% of New Yorkers a failure. No, Governor, the only failure here is you, sitting in the executive offices in Albany as Nero did in Rome, watching the state go up in flames and adding fuel to the fire. In 2026, New Yorker voters will demand real accountability for Hochul's mismanagement of our state, its budget, its MTA, and more. And that day can't come soon enough. That's Republican Mike Lawler, who, again, being speculated that he is going to run against Governor Hochul. He's a Republican. He'll be running against either Hochul or maybe Richie Torres. And there could be other people that jump in. Mike Lawler just seems to be the first one out of the gate. Richie Torres, the first one out of the gate on the Democrat side, seeing a real opening there to take on Hochul. He's doing more. Lawler's good on public safety too, but that's what Richie Torres has been running with is that specific issue, public safety. So time will tell. We got a couple other New York State issues. I see a lot of comments coming in. Thank you. You guys are getting warmed up this morning. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us.
Hustling plus overbooked plus bustling plus cleaning overlooked. It all adds up. With Mary Maid's professional cleaning services, you'll have one less thing to worry about. Mary Maids, relax, it's done. Plus too busy, plus bustling, plus in a tizzy. It all adds up. With Mary Maid's professional cleaning services, you'll have one less thing to worry about. Mary Maids, relax, it's done.
Football's newest show breaks down all things NFL. GMFB Overtime.
Check out top highlights, player interviews, special guests, and everything in between. 5 days a week.
GMFB Overtime. It's football for everyone.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We have a lot of comments coming in. Let's get right to them. These from viewers. Hochul's state of the state. I wish she would do it in another state. I don't think she has the best interests of this state. Or maybe she could join Gavin Newsom. Thank you very much. Let's up. What's next, I should say. Hochul, this is from a different viewer. Hochul is so delusional that she needs to be institutionalized, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Do you think that'll be addressed? Because I know that's one of the directions that she's kind of signaled, and Democrats have signaled some support that involuntary, what do they call it? What's the exact term for institutionalized, to be institutionalized? That it's taking people with drug addiction and mental health problems off the street. They've signaled some support for it. I don't know if that'll come from the state, but I understand your point. But they're trying to push that, and it would be. Richie Torres was pushing it as well as a help when it comes to the public safety crisis. So next up, comment from a different viewer. To be clear, I think it's great to have anyone of any party to participate in the inaugural festivities and do the right thing to support an incoming president. But blatant disregard for him in this manner is disgusting. I'm assuming you mean blatant disregard for Trump. Yeah, I mean, if you look at, like you said, what Snoop did, I don't know if he's going to be involved. Everybody else involved seems to be, whatever you say about Carrie Underwood, I mean, they seem to be pro-Trump. I don't know about Carrie Underwood specifically, but I think she raises a fair enough point that, she believes in the country and she wants to help unify the country. So, comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. The only way Hochul could help New Yorkers is to resign. Well, thank you. That's a good point. I don't think that'll come up in the State of the State. I'm going to be bold and make that prediction. We got a comment from a viewer. Ask Phil, that means Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, why states go after booze and smoking, but pot is okay. And he could maybe show a list of all businesses New York lost since 1980 because of state government. I would think that'd be almost impossible to prove or to have that list. I could be wrong. I'll talk to him about it. But I could only imagine since 1980 how many businesses we've lost because of state government. The ones that are concerning are the ones we don't even know about. The ones, think of all these major businesses and corporations that never even consider New York on their list of states to do business in. That's not even considered an option. So you can't even put a real number on the businesses because there's so many that don't even consider us when they would be a boon for our economy. Recall her. Unfortunately, we learned just the other week there is no way to recall a governor in New York. Ironically, the only person that can oust a governor in New York would be the governor, because she's the one that can take various elected officials out and put new ones in. Anyway, at certain levels. One quick thing, speaking of the governor, and then we'll move along from New York State issues. Yeah, how am I doing on time? Okay. There was a poll, and I want to warn you as I bring this up, it sounds very reminiscent of what Governor Cuomo used to do, which is release these certain polls and just to look how popular he was. But Governor Cuomo would handily win a ranked choice Democratic primary election for mayor, according to a new poll. Cuomo dominated the field of likely opponents in a ranked choice election. That's how they do things in New York City, even though he hasn't officially jumped in the race. Now, the poll was conducted by Democrat activist group Progressive Democrats of America. Some 32% of those picked Cuomo as their favorite candidate, with former city comptroller Scott Stringer trailing far behind with 10%, followed by Brad Lander, the city comptroller, at 8%, and Queens State Senator Jessica Ramos at 7%. Adams was the top choice of only 6% of those polled, tying him with Assembly member Zoran Mandani. In a projected ranked choice scenario, 39% opted for Cuomo as their first round pick. And I'm not going to keep reading all these numbers. Now, Adams said during a press conference on Monday, they were calling him mayor. They were measuring the drapes, referencing Andrew Yang when it was talked about Andrew Yang running in 2021. Polls don't make mayors. People do. I don't focus on polls. He said he didn't start life on third base, perhaps a subtle shot at Cuomo. No one handed me an empire, Adams said. Alluding to his legal and political challenges, Adams said, it's so amazing I'm still in it. I'm still here. So anyway, this could be kind of a sneaky way Cuomo could be maybe have a little bit of a hand in this to try to scare others from running, to try to get a campaign going where people almost draft him into running. It is stated that Cuomo is not a candidate for mayor, but he is running, or he is mulling a run. His former aide, Melissa DeRosa, said Cuomo starts out as the clear frontrunner, and it's not because of his name ID. She believes that the supporters of former city comptroller Scott Stringer and state senators Zelnor Miri of Brooklyn and Ramos are likely to rank Cuomo as their second choice. New Yorkers aren't going to replace one corrupt showboat with another who spent 8 years selling out New York City and cares more about rehabilitating his own image than improving New Yorkers' lives, said Stringer campaign spokesperson Alyssa Cass. Scott is leading the current field and is best positioned to close the curtains on Andrew Cuomo's potential vanity act. Your thoughts, the political comeback of Andrew Cuomo. Oh, by the way, just as a story that Governor Hochul said she was going to do something about, nothing was ever done. We predicted on the program at the time that this was going to be the case. We said when she started talking about it, it was because her hand was forced, but she will not actually do something once the stories die out from the news. Well, an eye-popping amount of New Yorkers support a mask ban after the troubling anti-Jewish incidents. If you recall, there was a time when someone went on the subway and was telling basically those with Jewish faith to get off of the subway. It was very intimidating. Or to raise your hand is very intimidating. It was, you know exactly what it was about. That made a big story. And Governor Hochul said, yeah, maybe we'll look at this mask ban. We said on the program at the time, she will not do anything about it. She doesn't have the support from the far left in Albany. She has to just wiggle her way out of it. We were right. Nothing was ever done. But listen to this, 75% of voters support a mask ban in New York State, with support across all demographics. More than 2/3 of 800 respondents, 68%, said although protecting free speech rights during protests is important, it must be balanced with public safety and does not extend to someone terrorizing others by engaging in hateful or harassing behavior. Only 23% said they believe people should have the ability to wear anything they choose regardless of their behavior. Now, we know that in many instances this was done to harass, to intimidate Jewish members of the community. Now, an eye-popping 74% of Jewish voters surveyed said discrimination and harassment is worse, as did 2/3 of elderly voters over the age of 75. Okay, just wanted to pass that along to you. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back. A lot to cover still here on Frankly Speaking. We could talk, if you are just joining us, we did mention this a lot at the beginning of the program because it is a breaking story, that the DOJ late last night released former special counsel Jack Smith's report on the investigation into Trump election interference case. It should come as no surprise, just like they wanted to make sure he had the felony label before he sworn in. Jack Smith and Merrick Garland had to make sure that they had another dig at Trump. I think it kind of that idea, what Trump talks about so often, about the deep state and the swamp. I think this proves it, that if he didn't win in November, you would have the continuation of this type of deep state, this type of lawfare used against political opponents. We can talk about that if you'd like. We can talk about the state of the state, all that, much more. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
If you or a loved one regularly used hair relaxers or straighteners and were diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation.
I've used hair relaxers for years. I had no idea they could cause cancer.
Chemical hair relaxers and straighteners have been linked to serious conditions, including several types of cancer. If you used hair relaxers and have been diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, call us now. There's no fee unless we win your case. Call today.
If you're in the market for a vehicle but not looking to buy new, Elm Chevrolet has a great selection of certified pre-owned vehicles ready to go. Locally sourced, serviced, and priced, you'll find the right vehicle at Elm Chevrolet on Church Street in Elmira. Together, let's drive.
Make your first move with battery power made by Steel. Right now, save $50 on the FSA 57 battery trimmer. Real STIHL. Find yours.
I'm Marianne Kurt. I've lived here for 70 years, but I do fine right here in my house, and I want to be here as long as I can be. And I feel comfortable knowing that if something happened to me, someone would know because of the cameras that are installed in various spots in my home. That has been a wonderful gift to me, to be able to have that security and that support from Full Circle America, and that's what it's all about.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. And we are back. We had a couple comments. Sorry, I didn't have a chance. I ran up to get some more tea. I will read those when we come back. Okay. We got some good comments coming in. Okay. My answer to Cuomo as mayor is no mo Cuomo. I always had trouble saying that. Thank you for that. But we have a nice one here from Ken. Ken, I'll get to that in just a moment. First off, Senate is closer to adopting the Laken-Riley Act, cracking down on illegal immigrants for theft and shoplifting. The Senate inched closer Monday to final passage of the Laken-Riley Act, which requires immigration officials to detain illegal migrants who engage in theft, shoplifting, and related crimes. Lawmakers voted 82-10 to consider the measure, with dozens of Democrats joining Republicans in approval. This is one of those examples of some politicians realizing, we made a huge mistake after the landslide victory of Trump, and Republicans realizing that this isn't a bridge too far. I mean, you've already got someone that's here illegally, and then they involved in a crime. Maybe we then look at detaining them. That's why you've seen many switch. You can't really call it the Trump effect. It's just them worrying about their political well-being. Senate Majority Leader John Thune saying the bipartisan Laken-Riley Act would not only address glaring holes in our immigration policy, but it would hopefully prevent other families from suffering the pain that Laken-Riley's has suffered. Now, we know the history of the name of who it's in reference to, the 22-year-old Georgia nursing student who was attacked, viciously strangled, etc., beaten to death by an illegal immigrant while jogging in February of 2024, triggering nationwide outrage, and rightfully so. We now know he was a member of a gang, Jose Ibarra, 26, and he was convicted of Riley's murder and sentenced to life in prison back in November. We're not going to give the whole history of him. Now, Immigration and Customs officials later explained that Ibarra was not held following a New York arrest because he was released before the agency was able to issue a detainer. That's what caused this to be this kind of a specific bill. The GOP-controlled House passed a similar bill last year, but it was never taken up by the Democrat-controlled Senate. Now that Republicans have the upper chamber, they're hoping to wrangle it through as a ready-to-sign measure when Donald Trump takes office next week. Okay. So today is, and again, we can talk more about it, it's a breaking news story overnight. We talked about it early on, but the DOJ did release Jack Smith's report on the investigation into Trump's election interference. Jack Smith saying it's laughable that this was done for any political purpose, meaning the original report, why being released now, how that's not political. This also ties in with, of course, why Judge Morcan was so laser-like focused on making sure that he could sentence Trump so that it would be official that Trump was a convicted felon before being sworn in. It's just no lessons learned from November. But now we have the cabinet, Trump's incoming cabinet. Today, Pete Hegseth and others will meet in front of the Senate, but Abigail Shrier had a really good point on this, and it's about the people that Trump picked. She quotes venture capitalist Mark Anderson, recently expressed what many felt at the re-election of Donald Trump. Not triumph so much as relief. Quote, I hope this last 10 years increasingly is just going to feel like a bad dream. I can't believe we tolerated the level of repression and anger and emotional incontinence and cancellation campaigns. Much of it was orchestrated or encouraged by our government. One could say many things about Trump's cabinet pick. At times, they seem to embody this kind of go after the government attitude, but they also undeniably represent government by the canceled. And I thought this was a good point that she raised. Government by the canceled. A group of people that don't need to be reminded of the administrative state's ability to coerce the American public by calling in favors from big tech or pulling the levers of regulation, audit, or investigation, because many have experienced such treatment firsthand. You see it a little bit with what Pete Hegseth has been going through when it's attacks on his character, attacks through anonymous sources. Tulsi Gabbard was briefly placed on a government watch list for criticizing Kamala Harris. The Biden White House and Surgeon General pressured social media companies to censor Stanford epidemiologist Jay Bhattacharya's attempt to warn the public that COVID-19 lockdowns were the biggest policy error in American history. Now Trump has tapped him to be the National Institutes of Health. And Elon Musk, appointed to lead a newly created Department of Government Efficiency, knowingly overpaid for Twitter to give Americans a sphere for free speech. At takeover, Musk immediately released the Twitter files, revealing a coordinated effort by the Biden administration to censor the speech of Americans whose views it disfavored. So what the crux of this argument is that they'll be ready for these confirmation hearings because they've suffered this. They've seen what government can do. And that goes back, and I know they will tell you that the so-called deep state, that there's no deep state. But then you'll have an article, which we brought to you a couple weeks ago, where Politico specifically said that the nameless, faceless bureaucrats should work behind the scenes to harm the Trump agenda, to stymie the Trump agenda. So, again, one of those scenarios, you can't have it both ways. Is there, as Trump calls it, a deep state, or is there not? One wonderful thing about Americans, she writes, we despise being bullied by our government. And that goes back into the lawfare used against Trump, talking about Jack Smith's report being released. People did not like being told who they can and cannot vote for. When you had groups trying to keep Trump off the ballot, then you had this lawfare. And Trump himself said it, that he's one indictment away from the White House, and it was the case. This was way back. There have been plenty of indictments since then. So the American people don't like bullied into being told who to support and who not to support. Over the last decade, for anyone with views departing from progressive orthodoxy, American life has become increasingly suffocating. And I can't remember who it was who said it. I want to say it was Willie Robertson from Duck Dynasty. Weird to quote him, but it was something to the extent of, it feels different than 2016. This time around, it feels kind of cool. His argument was to be a Trump supporter, where in 2016, of course, quite the opposite. They tried to ostracize you, tried to keep you hidden, hope that you would be self-censoring and not say your true beliefs. And that's why I think it came as such a surprise when their pollings were showing Hillary Clinton would easily win. Then he wins. I think it was a surprise because there's still a lot of people then, and as there still are now, that didn't want to tell anybody who they supported because it cost them family, friends, and loved ones. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole piece. But they're a little rogue in a good way, these picks that Trump has made. But the media continues to push this idea that they're loyalists. That's the term that they use, loyalist. I don't think that is the case. I think they're going to be loyal to the agenda of Trump, just like the American people are. After winning not just the Electoral College, but the popular vote, they want to see that agenda enacted. So just as any president tries to pick people in his cabinet that are loyal to him, Trump has done the same, but it's more so loyal to the American people, loyal to the voters who want the Make America Great Again agenda or the America First agenda. Many of Trump's appointees are young. Some have never worked in government. Some will end up doing and saying strange, perhaps unacceptably strange things. Some may turn out to be overwhelmed and fail and get replaced. The difference is we'll know about it. The media will make sure of that. This isn't a group that has learned to play the inside the beltway under the table game. At the top of the administrative state, Trump has placed people keenly aware of government's yen for intimidating its own citizens. That alone may be enough to shake Americans out of our recent complacency over the trampling of our rights and the unfairness that so many of us have been urged to embrace. Many of our most pressing problems do not require decades of government experience, so much as they will to solve them. Yes, the decades of, that's why they keep saying after every pick that Trump made, heads were exploding around Washington. Well, good. It's not the bureaucratic way of doing things. It's not this person's been in Washington for 40 years, so he's next. Or she's next on the list. It's not that at all. And that's why so many people are upset with his cabinet picks. They don't like him, for lack of a better word, thinking outside the box, going for people that aren't Washington insiders, aren't Washington favorites. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. I realize we're running a tad bit late. Keep those comments coming in. We'll read what Ken had to say when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be, let me see, how am I doing on time? Yeah, we'll be right back.
Are you over 50? Would you like to get up to 33% more income in retirement? Then call now for this free book, Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers. This free book reveals little-known secrets about annuity strategies that will help you make the right choices before buying an annuity. Call right now for your free book, and as a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report. Both absolutely free for calling Annuity General today.
Call 800-354-5972.
Welcome to Frankly Speaking, talking to the people that affect your life, that affect all of our day-to-day lives. This is something you're not going to get anywhere else. We've got a lot to offer. There'll be a lot of news, local, regional, national, really the things that affect you. And I think you'll be glad that you tuned in. So think of it as radio on TV. Frankly Speaking, live, 2 hours long, starting at 6 a.m. on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is history making.
Fox website is here now. WYDCTV.com. Local and national news that keeps you informed and involved. WYDCTV.com. Today's weather, up to date and in your town. WYDCTV.com. Sports news, local events, and health stories that affect you. WYDCTV.com. The Big Fox website. Your news here now. WYDCTV.com.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thanks so much for joining us. We're getting a lot of love on the program this morning. Listen to this. A couple comments. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. After briefly leaving the room while watching Frankly Speaking, my wife changed the channel to a show. Wow, that's tough to say. Sewing show. Should I file for divorce or is this pardonable? I think I should stay out of this one. I would say, in my personal beliefs, it is very pardonable. It is okay. I understand. Maybe you could have a later in the day edition of Frankly Speaking to save marriages. My goodness. No, but I understand. Your wife just wanted to change of pace for a second, but everything's fine. So I would say it is definitely pardonable. Thanks for putting it like I'm judge, jury, and executioner over here. Thank you very much. Another comment. This one's coming from Ken. Now, Ken, if you're not familiar, if you're new to the show, I should say, he was kind enough to watch all of the DNC and fill us in the morning of what he saw, his takeaways. Like CNN always does their takeaways. He did his takeaways, and he did it for other events too. But that was that whole week where it was just a lost week. So he is now giving us tips. Here we go. With the State of the State address at 1 o'clock today, I just wanted to give your viewers a little advice on how to stay safe. He's an expert on this, so he'll know. 1, drink plenty of fluids before Hochul's speech, preferably something calming, not an energy drink. 2, get comfortable on a couch or recliner and move any heavy objects within reach. Remember, you won't be able to calm down afterwards if your television screen is broken. Good point, Ken. 3, if you're married or have children in the house, I strongly suggest that they visit a trusted friend. Passionate cursing isn't fun for other people in the house. Passionate cursing. That'd be a good name for a rock band. Remember, Hochul is a Biden Democrat. She's only repeating what she is told to say. So don't focus your anger on her. Focus it on the Democrat Party in general. That's a very good point. And above all, remember that there is a gubernatorial election in 2026. And if Republicans and independents stick together, we could get someone like Lee Zeldin or Don Trump Jr. elected. And finally, listen to Frankly Speaking Wednesday morning to get the real truth on the state of the state. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for that kind word. And thank you for the tips. We need it. You know, that's interesting you say that about Don Trump Jr. There was talks of that at one time. I don't know. Do you think he has any interest in running? I mean, you could tell he loves the politics. But the name recognition, that would be very, very interesting if he ran for governor. You've got the money, I don't know. But I know we've heard that name thrown around in the past. You just piqued my interest with that. But I think you do raise a good point. She is just using the talking points. That's why she thought it was acceptable during the election, because Biden had just called Trump supporters garbage. Remember, she came out to try to get some attention and say, if you vote Republican, you're anti-American and anti-women. So I think she does. I don't even think she's given the talking points. That's the sad thing. I think she has to go out and search for the talking points. They don't even say, okay, here you go. This is what we're talking about now. She has to see what others are saying and copy it word for word, because that's what it seems like when we saw what she was saying around election time, because she's not really that prime time politician. You got to figure it was Cuomo's downfall that got her there, not really ready to be at that level. And we saw that when she gave her speech at the DNC, that it just wasn't there. Okay, we have other comments coming in. We'll get to those. We got some good comments coming in. We'll get to those in just a moment. But Pete Hegseth heads to Capitol Hill for the fiery hearing on his record and his plans to shake up the Pentagon. One Republican aide said Democrats certainly aren't going to make this a walk in the park by any means. You'll see Democrats are pretty organized. They're thinking strategically to make sure everything is covered. And it's not a hearing that gets overly repetitive, said one senior Democrat, who also went on to say, I don't think it's going to be particularly hostile, but I do think it's going to be very tough. It's going to focus a lot just on what we should expect of a nominee for this job and where he falls short. There are questions about the things he's done, his character, and his leadership. This is arguably, I hate to use the word controversial. I think they throw around the word controversial so much because I don't particularly believe he is, but they've tried to make him controversial. They've tried to attack his credibility. And that's why some have said this could be Brett Kavanaugh, like Kavanaugh hearing 2.0 or on steroids. With little hope of winning any Democrat votes, Hegseth will have to woo moderate Republicans who had previously expressed skepticism about his nomination. Democrats are expected to hammer him over his past conduct and his qualification to lead the government's largest agency, which employs 3 million people. Now, of course, Hegseth is an Army National Guard veteran who did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, is relatively young and inexperienced compared to defense secretaries in the past, having retired as a major. But Republicans say they don't want someone who made it to the top brass, who's become entrenched in the Pentagon establishment. So we'll be watching that closely, just like with the State of the State. Big news day, isn't it? Come to think of it. Hochul's State of the State, and you have a Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing. But I do think that was an interesting point by the New York Post, that writer for the New York Post, saying that these people have been through this before. I mean, he worked at Fox News. He's used to these kind of attacks on him, and others. Tulsi Gabbard's used to attacks by her own party, mind you, normally, but in this case by maybe perhaps both. Be interesting how it all goes down with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as well. But the Defense Secretary nominee, Pete Hegseth's FBI background check, which the media just kept hammering, and Schumer and others saying they haven't seen it, they demand to see it. Well, it came back as unremarkable, according to a report on Monday. According to Punch Bowl News, his FBI file was delivered to Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Roger Wicker and Ranking Member Jack Reed late last week. The outlet reported that Senators Roger Wicker and Jack Reed, the chair and ranking member respectively, are the only committee members who have viewed Hegseth's FBI file, which was delivered to the panel late last week. Republicans who have been briefed said that the report is unremarkable. An advisor to Hegseth said all the Democrats' hopes and dreams were crushed with one word. Hegseth at the time said he had welcomed the background check and even looked forward to it amid anonymously sourced smears peddled by the mainstream media. Democrats have openly opposed Hegseth's nomination, citing anonymous allegations and mainstream media reports about Hegseth's alleged engagement in sexual misconduct, financial mismanagement of veterans organizations, and excessive drinking. That's what, unsubstantiated claims, but nonetheless, that's what happens when it's trial by media. Now, Chuck Schumer and Democrats on the Armed Services Committee will huddle Monday amid a standoff over Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth. So this was yesterday, I should say. Only one top Senate Democrat has read Hegseth's FBI background check. His confirmation hearing begins this morning. Paperwork delays meant the background checks and other materials for top Trump nominees were given to lawmakers late. Democrats have pushed for the report to be available to all members before the hearing. Jack Reed, a Democrat, met with Hegseth last week. Reed said the meeting did not relieve his concerns about the nomination. Now, Hegseth's hearing is the party's first shot to carry out the demands handed down by Schumer, skewer Trump's nominees, and the MAGA brand. I don't know if this pays off. I mean, they've tried to do a good job of attacking him. Oh, wow, there's a Corning whistle. We're running late. Keep those comments coming in. I see a lot are coming in this morning. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us.
Attention, Elmeron may lead to vision loss.
If you have suffered vision problems after taking Elmeron to treat bladder pain, call the Hearn Law Firm. Elmeron may be responsible for your vision problems, and you may deserve compensation for your injuries.
If you took Elmeron and now have vision problems, call the Hearn Law Firm at 888-308-3866 right now. You could find out if you qualify in less than 2 minutes. Call 888-308-3866 for your free case review.
Heather and I had an argument just like any other couple. I was lost and lonely. I had snapped, I had a gun, and I was going to take my own life. Heather helped me realize that there was still life to live. For the better of myself, my family, my weapon is now safely put away.
My son, Ricky, took his life by the use of a firearm. It broke me in ways that I never knew that I could be broken. And I contemplated suicide. Afterwards, we found out his girlfriend, she was pregnant. If that was my grandson, I was gonna have to be here for him. I still own my firearm. I keep it in a safe because I want to keep my grandson and myself safe.
A moment of crisis can happen to anyone.
Store your gun securely, locked, unloaded, and away from ammo.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Let's go back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go back to viewer comments. Well, if a vote for Trump was anti-this and that, according to Hochul, well, a vote for her is anti-New York. Well, thank you very much. A couple referencing, well, we'll go to this one first, and then Ken, if you're watching, we got a couple comments in your direction. First up, though, Trump is the right man to fix D.C. They all adored Trump until he decided to run for office to fix America. He knew their crimes, their perversions, and their abuse of the American taxpayer, and they were and are scared he will expose them. It's going to be interesting, but get ready for the deep state obstruction, sedition, and insurrection. Well, the deep state, when it comes to obstruction, we saw that from Politico, encouraging them for that exact reason. All right, Ken, this is what we have from viewers for you. Thanks, Ken. Good tips, but I'll still let you watch for me and my gut health. Thank you. Comment from a different viewer. I'm surprised that Ken was able to maintain his sanity after having watched the DNC comedy. There were some questions at the time. There was definitely some questions. Ken was going a little bit out there. So yes, I think everything's okay now. Clean bill of health. Richard Blumenthal, a man who was misleading, we'll put it politely, we'll be very PC here, who was misleading on his service in Vietnam, now says that Pete Hegseth is unqualified, and it's almost a joke. I mean, if you talk about unqualified, if you ran as serving in Vietnam and you didn't, isn't that kind of unqualifying? I don't know. Oh, by the way, I know some people have been worried about this. We're going to start moving fast here, folks, because we're almost out of time. I've heard from quite a few viewers that were concerned about the meeting between Trump and Fetterman. Well, this happened on Sunday night. President-elect Donald Trump complimented Senator John Fetterman as an impressive and common-sense person following their meeting. In an interview with the Washington Examiner, Trump spoke highly of Fetterman and his wife, Giselle. It was a totally fascinating meeting. He's a fascinating man, and his wife is lovely. They were both up, and I couldn't be more impressed. He's a common-sense person. He's not liberal or conservative. He's just a common-sense person, which is beautiful. He reported that Fetterman and Trump discussed various topics in the hour-long sit-down, ranging from the border to how tariffs could benefit U.S. steel. They're going to make people that have steel mills do very well, and the people that work at those steel mills are going to do very well. Fetterman, who has repeatedly demonstrated he is unafraid to think outside the mainstream of the Democratic Party, declared that he had no gatekeeper. If you recall, I mentioned this on the program, I think Monday maybe, or was it late last week? I think that, one, he's the president, or he will be officially. And I think it's pretty reasonable that if the president would like to have a conversation or invite someone to have a conversation, to have it. And no one is my gatekeeper. So there is your update. Oh, now that they keep pushing, when I say they, the media, keep pushing this idea that it's scary that Trump wants people around him that are loyal, which I think any president wants. What are your thoughts about this? I meant to mention this earlier in the broadcast. This is coming from the Associated Press. Incoming senior Trump administration officials have begun questioning career civil servants who work at the White House National Security Council about who they voted for in the 2024 election, their political contributions, and whether they have made social media posts that could be considered incriminating by President-elect Donald Trump's team, according to a U.S. official familiar with the matter. This goes back to what we were talking about with that article from Politico. These are the kind of people that Politico wanted to gum up the works for the incoming president. The nameless, faceless bureaucrats, the civil servants that you're not familiar with, they won't say, AP won't say bureaucrats, but the civil servants. These are the people that they want to be obstructionists behind the scenes towards this president. So all the president's team is saying is, let's have a meeting. Let's see what we're dealing with here. At least some of these non-political employees have begun packing up their belongings since being asked about their loyalty to Trump, after they had earlier been indication that they would be asked to stay on at the NSC in the new administration. This was someone speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive personnel matter. This is very fascinating because it kind of goes back in line with what Elon Musk was saying and Vivek Ramaswamy, that if you make people come back to work, because there's so many in Washington that are still working from home or some hybrid of working from home, they said that if you demand that come back to work 5 days a week, that right there would clear out a lot of employees in the bureaucracy. Well, here's another example. Asking about, I know they say loyalty, but questioning. Do you have the president and his agenda's best interest at heart when you're working behind the scenes, or no? And it's already caused many to pack up their belongings. Trump's pick for National Security Advisor, Florida Representative Mike Waltz, in recent days publicly signaled his intention to get rid of all non-political appointees and career intelligence officials serving on the NSC by Inauguration Day to ensure the council is staffed with those who support Trump's agenda. A wholesale removal of foreign policy and national security experts from the NSC on day one of the new administration could deprive Trump's team of considerable expertise and institutional knowledge at a time when the U.S. is grappling with difficult policy challenges in Ukraine, the Middle East, and beyond. Such questioning could also make new policy experts brought into the NSC less likely to speak up about policy differences and concerns. So now looking to maybe skirt that issue of having bureaucrats trying to be obstructionist to his agenda, asking bureaucrats at the National Security Council about their political beliefs. We have a couple other things we're going to rush through when we come back, wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Get all your last minute questions and comments in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. It was announced late yesterday, and I meant to kick off the program with this and saved it to the end. Biden announced one more round of student debt forgiveness, even though we know the courts, Supreme Court specifically, has said this is not allowed. He has said, I don't care. This brings the total to 5 million recipients at a cost to taxpayers of $183 billion. Yes, that's with a B, $183 billion. Biden said Monday that his administration would forgive federally owned student debt for a further 150,000 borrowers, costing taxpayers another $4.23 billion and bringing the grand total to roughly 5 million handout recipients during his term in office. So that's about $183.6 billion in student debt write-offs, erased, after the Supreme Court in 2023 struck down a prior plan to wipe $400 billion off the balance sheets with a stroke of a pen. Monday's announcement continues a piecemeal approach by Biden, who nears the end of a strategy to compensate for the court-killed plan to write off between $10,000 and $20,000 per college attendee. The initiative stoked sharp criticism from Republicans and complaints from Americans who either didn't attend college, have already repaid their balance, or maybe helped pay for their loved ones. All right, we got a couple comments right before we go here. Frank, I would bet that the Democrats are feverishly searching for some dirt on Fetterman. He needs to be taught a lesson like Eric Adams. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, especially depending on what he does with these nominees, these cabinet members, and if he switches and votes for, because he said he would be open-minded about it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because they really defended him when Republicans were attacking him originally, and now I'm sure they have some regrets. Meant to mention this as well. Chuck Todd does plan to leave NBC when his contract is up later this year. That is what's being reported. We know there's quite a bias in his reporting. We've talked about it numerous times in the past. He has reportedly been meeting with Washington-based media organizations to discuss potential roles outside NBC, including opportunities in broadcast and digital media. So meet the press moderator, plotting his next steps in journalism once his contract expires later this year. Also, Ron DeSantis, I know we're on our way out the door. Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced yesterday that he will convene a special session of the state legislature aimed at helping President-elect Donald Trump implement his immigration agenda. Quote, I'm going to call the legislature in a special session starting the week of January 27th. We have the next president taking office January 20th. We anticipate executive orders to be issued immediately after the swearing in and the inaugural address. We're going to have some time to process and make sure we're doing what we need to do, but that we need to act, and we need to act quickly. One last comment on the way out the door. Hey, Frank, tell me how you did this show in 1 hour. Yeah, I know. It's hard to believe that we once did, frankly speaking, 1 hour. So much to cover, so much to talk about. Well, thank you for the comments today. We've got a lot to talk about tomorrow. We'll talk about the nominations in the confirmation process, the confirmation hearings. We'll also talk about Governor Hochul's State of the State, which is, again, today at 1 o'clock. We'll get your reaction to that. So make sure you tune in tomorrow morning, starting at 6 a.m., and every weekday morning, starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. Look forward to it already.
Are you ready for winter in New York State? Ready for thrills like this? Discoveries like this? Views like this? Are you ready to make memories? Plan the perfect trip or have an impromptu getaway. It's time to explore everything that makes New York easy to love. Discover more at iloveny.com.